Folks, Canadian Prepper here, back again with a daily dose of doom and gloom, the most compendious World War III daily meta-analysis on the internet. This is unscripted, no teleprompters, no jump cuts, just raw, uncut, unadulterated ramblings of a preparedness madman trying to demonstrate the intersects between all of the chaos and catastrophic events that unfold on a daily basis. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Now, we got a shitload of information to discuss today. As you can see behind me, the largest ever flotilla of naval ships has broached the Aleutian Islands off the coast of Alaska. These are Russian and Chinese warships. And these are no small potatoes warships, okay? These are frigates. These are corvettes. These are destroyers. Naval captains are saying that this is unprecedented and that this is a major World War III provocation. I threw the World War III in there because essentially that's what it is. We're going to talk about the implications of this, why I was not surprised to hear this, why I didn't make an emergency video when I heard about this yesterday. But that's just one of many stories that we're following right now. We have Taurus missiles, 500-mile range missiles potentially heading to Ukraine. The final hurdle of deliberation has apparently been overcome, and we're very likely to see these missiles as soon as the Ukrainians run out of their Scalp and Storm Shadow missiles. At least I think that's what the plan is. We have Poland contemplating closing the border with Belarus altogether. They're pretty much in the final stages of that as we speak. They have anti-tank Hedgehogs set up at some of the crossing points. They have a fence now. They're moving another 1,000 troops to the border in addition to the 1,000 that they just moved. Of course, we have Baltic states moving towards the Suwalki corridor. Things are most definitely heating up. Some people just love to hear bad news. Well, you came to the right place. But the good news is, if you're a prepper, this really is water off a duck's back at this point because we're already prepared for the worst case scenario. That doesn't mean we can't continuously hone our preparedness skills. 3,000 troops have arrived in the Persian Gulf. They are going to be deployed on commercial vessels in near the Strait of Hormuz for the first time ever in history in order to prevent Ukrainian commandos from seizing those vessels. The shizzy is definitely hitting the fizzy. We have a massive explosion. Just a coincidence. It was just an accident, they say, at a Turkish grain silo. They've ruled out sabotage, but if you ask me, that's quite the coincidence considering all that's been going on in the Black Sea with respect to grain blockades and yada, yada, yada. So is this going to have another significant increase in food prices? The Chinese sure think so because they are stockpiling every single thing under the sun like there's no tomorrow. I'm going to show you a graphic that breaks that all down in just a minute. We have the Polish military parade coming August 15th saying it's going to be the biggest since World War II. We're just breaking records every single day, aren't we? New unprecedented events happening day after day after day. This is the age of consequences, whether it's unprecedented heat waves, unprecedented military buildups and exercises, unprecedented amounts of casualties in single battles. It's all here. We got it all, apparently. Niger has closed its airspace. Victoria Nuland went there just today begging to speak with the deposed president who is currently being detained by the occupiers there, and she wasn't allowed to talk to him, so it's looking as though her attempts to drive a wedge between the Wagner and hence the Russian government has failed, and it looks like Niger is about to go to war with the ECOWAS pro-NATO African nations in the not-so-distant future. The ultimatum that they had given Niger to comply and restore the democracy there was yesterday, I do believe, but they've extended that now because, of course, the reality of military logistics has lightly sunk in, and they've realized, oh, we're going to need more time to prepare an army if we're actually going to go to war with these rebels there. We have a Zelensky assassination attempt foiled. We're going to talk about what the implications of such a thing might be. Is Russia's new strategy to go after the decision makers? Have they finally reached a breaking point? Of course, we still have the countdown to the South Korean civil defense drill, which is going to see 51 million, or at least a good portion of its 51 million inhabitants, descend into nuclear-ready bunkers, all within the same 20-minute time span, while their country does a joint military exercise with the United States. Let's hope that the North Koreans don't misinterpret that one. As far as I know, the red line phone between the North Koreans and the US is still non-operational. Abrams tanks are on the water and headed to Ukraine. They're expected to be there early fall. So we're going to finally see once and for all an Abrams tank come up against a Russian T-90 for the first time. Apparently those German Leopard tanks aren't faring so well. It's still mind-boggling that we're living in a world where German tanks are fighting Russian tanks in Ukraine on the frontier, and we still can sleep in our beds snug at night, not worrying about nuclear Armageddon. It's just perplexing and amazing at the same time. We have biblical flooding in China. Inflation continues to become a problem in spite of the fact that we're seeing disinflation. We are seeing no deflation. And what that means is that the compounding effects of these price increases is causing people to quite literally lose their mind. I released a video yesterday showing a higher ticket preparedness item. We do this from time to time because look, when you've prepared as long as I have, I started off in the gutter, in the absolute, I started off in the section of the store where they sold the big bags of rice, and that's where you should start too if you're just getting into preparedness. Don't be begrudging towards preppers who've been doing this for a long time. There are people, homesteaders, who have acreages worth north of $1 million. Don't excoriate them for their life's work of trying to go off grid. I'm guessing that a lot of people that write these comments don't realize that I actually live in a home which is probably smaller than the basement from which they dwell, because I'm sure most of them still live in their parents' basements. Now, the products that we showcase on the channel, they're not for everybody, okay? But we try to show you what is out there. And as the saying goes, time and time again, you get what you pay for, especially now that we're seeing the onshoring of a lot of industry in order to pay workers fair wages and make high quality products that are going to actually last and provide you with all the premium features that you're probably going to want at some point down the road. Well, we try to show you the best that's out there, which is why at my store, CanadianPreparedness.com, I only stock the best that's out there, even though the margins are absolutely abysmal. So I challenge anybody who made the comment on that video, the snarky remark that, oh, this is way too expensive and this is a ripoff. I would like to see you start a business, build it up, pay people fair wages in the current supply chain ridden with all sorts of problematic issues. Try to get it to the market for less. The same product with all the premium features. And if you can do it, I'll promote it for you free of charge. Okay? So I just thought I would say that because I think a lot of people are under financial stress. And I'm here to say that you don't need to break the bank to prepare. In fact, at the end of the day, as I stated in one of the 9 rules, or the 9, what would we call them, enduring principles, immutable laws that will be present post SHTF, one of them is the fact that you need to be prepared to lose absolutely everything. If you're not prepared to lose absolutely everything, the cornerstone of preparedness really is flexibility and adaptability. That's what it's all about. I've always said on this channel that people who navigate the streets, people who live on the streets, they're already many steps ahead against most people who are just trying to preserve what they have, which is the tendency of preppers trying to preserve the lifestyle that we have. A lot of those street people have more street sense and more adaptability and flexibility. Thus, they're already leaps and bounds ahead in terms of their life experience and the kinds of storms that they're going to be able to weather, both figuratively and literally. Ukraine is wrapping up drone attacks in the Black Sea. What effect is that going to have on oil prices? They're now attacking oil tankers. Are we going to see outcries from Greenpeace, from Greta, from the World Economic Forum? I highly doubt it unless it fits the agenda. Like I said, guys, one of these days, you're not going to see me on here. So all you trolls are going to get your wish if I just keep on talking. So if you see me make these videos, you got to encourage me on, because one of these days, I'll say something that rubs the pyramid, the eyes at the top of the pyramid the wrong way, and your wish will be granted. Okay, so just hang in there, guys. It's coming. Now, before that day, though, I'm hoping that I can break down a lot of shit that's going on. Now, this is interesting. Not many people talking about this. This is the National Risk Register put out by the UK government. Now, I've taken the liberty of breaking this down. Basically, what this is they do a comprehensive analysis, and I will read you their definition so I sound more intelligent. The NSRA, and I'll pretend like I'm not reading, the NSRA is produced using a rigorous and well-tested methodology based on international best practice. Basically, they get their actuaries in there and they determine how likely is nuclear Armageddon or a pandemic or an asteroid strike, a terrorist event, yada, yada, yada. It draws on input and challenge from hundreds of experts from the UK government departments, devolved administrations, and the government scientific community, intelligence, security agencies, independence, The latest assessment finalized in autumn 2022, and this is 25,000 pieces of data. Now, here's what they found, okay? This is all you need to know. What they found was the potential for a nuclear incident outside of Britain. This would have a significant impact. On the scale that they use, they have this matrix, and there's the impact, okay, on the x-axis, and on the y-axis, it's the likelihood of it happening. The worst case scenario, of course, is nuclear Armageddon. They're still saying that it's less than a 0.2%, essentially less than a 1% chance of full-blown nuclear Armageddon. However, a nuclear incident, actually I think that one's right here, a nuclear incident outside of the UK will have a significant impact, and the likelihood of that is 5 to 24%, okay? The most likely catastrophic incident between a 5 to 25% range is a pandemic. Now that's important because I forgot to mention, apparently researchers in the UK are working on what they call Disease X. Is it going to be some new coronavirus variant? Is it going to be the avian flu? They declined to say whether or not they were doing gain of function research, but you can bet that they believe that there is a 5 to 25% chance in the next 2 years of another global pandemic, which is going to be even more lethal and thus have catastrophic impact. Now, again, a nuclear incident outside of Britain. Let's talk about that. If there is a nuclear incident outside of Britain, what do you think is going to happen? I mean, to me, a nuclear bomb being detonated anywhere on this planet at this point in time, in the current geopolitical environment, would be like aliens revealing themselves to human beings. I really do believe that the effect that it will have on the economy, on supply chains, it will cause global panic. It's going to likely inflame all sorts of long-standing dormant conflicts that are out there, especially in Africa and the Middle East and elsewhere. So I think the problem is that once you get number one happen, the likelihood of number two happen drastically increases, and I think it moves into the higher risk category of 5 to 25%. The risk of a civil nuclear event, as they call it, that's basically code for mutually assured destruction, because of course, if there's a nuclear bomb detonated on the UK, you can bet that there's one probably in Washington and Moscow as well. Catastrophic impact, less than 1%, they say. And you know what? They used to say, if you're prepared for zombies, you're prepared for everything, but the true mark of a maverick prepper is somebody who's prepared for Mad Max, post-nuclear war Mad Max. That literally is the worst case scenario, aside some sort of asteroid extinction level event, which nobody's going to survive anyways. I do believe that that's probably the worst, absolute worst case. We have cyber attack on critical infrastructure. Moderate impact, they claim, but a 5 to 25% risk. What sort of moderate impact could that have? Well, that could be a cutting of the power supply. It could be increase in prices of various things. So you would see most likely inflation. You definitely see a disruption in services. You could see civil unrest. You could see emergency services failure to respond when they are needed. And there's a few other ones here that we should talk about. Attack on a NATO ally, they claim is very likely. So they rank that one between 25 to 100% likely. So again, some of these are going to moderate the others. So an attack on a NATO ally, if that one is done, and they're saying that it's 25 to 100% likely, or upwards of 25% likely, if that happens, the likelihood of a civil nuclear event drastically increases. The likelihood of attack on infrastructure happens. Failure of market infrastructure, economic collapse. They say that that's a moderate impact event. Okay, so it goes from low to moderate to significant to catastrophic. So a moderate impact and above 25% risk. Basically, they're talking about some sort of failure in the financial system, a collapse in the banks, etc. Assassination of a high-profile figure. They say that's low impact, but once again, wasn't that one of the things that started World War I? It's very likely that the assassination of a high-profile figure itself as an isolated incident is not going to bring society to a standstill, but it could very well put the wheels in motion on some other very bad things and escalations. So they're saying that that one is north of 25% likely. A total national grid power failure, a 1 to 5% risk in the next 2 years. Now, if somebody told me there's a 1 to 5% chance that you're going to die in an airplane crash if you go on an airplane, I'm pretty sure nobody would sign up. But that's what they're saying we can look forward to in the next 2 years. And that's just the next 2 years. And the thing with all of these catastrophes is if you have one happen, the likelihood of other ones happening increases. So we might not see an immediate national grid power failure, but if there is a cyber attack on critical infrastructure and a hybrid war is waged, the likelihood of national power grid failure will increase astronomically. Now, in terms of preparation for all these things, we have a library of videos, guys, that I would encourage you to go and watch. It's not all about doom and gloom. You gotta make sure that you're practicing preparedness, okay? And I could easily just come on here every day and do the exact same thing and make no high production prepping videos, and some people are actually pushing me in that direction, but I refuse to do it. If you ask me, that is the definition of grift, conforming to what some of my subscribers want. And that's not to say I don't respond to the feedback that you guys give me. I just feel as though it would be inauthentic for me to base my content around what other people are requesting. So we're going to keep doing things the same way for the foreseeable future. Daily dose of doom and gloom, peppered with real actionable information. Okay, we have a lot of that stuff coming up, especially a series I'm really excited about, and that's going to walk people through a introductory level tactical skills training that's going to be provided by the CCFR. We're going to make a very easy to follow video series. Okay, I know it's not going to get a lot of views, but it's going to be one of the most important videos if the shit really does hit the fan. They're saying pandemic has a catastrophic 5 to 25% risk. That is very, very high. And you can bet that the same people who are asking me for my papers in the last pandemic are going to be asking me for my papers once again, because we all know people love asking people for their papers, especially when they've been totally disempowered by the machine, and the only power they can exercise in their lives is in their lowly occupation. So, and this is not to necessarily denigrate anybody's occupation, but we've all seen Karen ask you for your papers or ask you to pull your mask up a little bit tighter around your nose. We all know what that experience is like, right? We know that there's some people who just can't wait to, tell people what to do once again. Large-scale CBRN attack, catastrophic, 1 to 5% risk. So that's chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear. That could be a dirty bomb. It could be some sort of anthrax. It could be an isolated radiological incident at a nuclear power plant. Other high impact, up to 25% likely. These are going to be conventional attacks on critical infrastructure, so perhaps attack on a pipeline. Space weather, they put up there as up to 25% likely. So we're talking about things from the sun which are going to impact the Earth's magnetic field. Talking about solar flares, okay? Heat waves, of course, will have a catastrophic effect. So you can go and check out the 200-page document. Very concise, and you can tell they put a lot of money into this. And in the very least, it gets you thinking about what the government is thinking. And they're saying that there's a variety of different crises that have a very high likelihood of unfolding. And the one thing that they don't necessarily talk about is the intersect of those various crises. If one happens, what is the likelihood of others happening? Of course, that would be a very complicated covariate analysis that I don't even know if it's statistically possible or useful information. But we can extrapolate all of this to North America. Even though this was made for the UK, I'm assuming that the effects hold true for North America. There might be more resiliencies within North America because we have a large supply of raw materials, unlike the UK, who is essentially on an island and they import a lot of their stuff. But nonetheless, what happens there will most certainly affect what is going on here. So let's just talk a little bit more about the news, shall we? Before I do that, I want to say, guys, one of the number one ways that you can prepare, and yes, this is not a sponsor pitch, but the great thing about having the store Canadian Preparedness is that I can support and sponsor my own videos in a way. So one of the things that I would encourage people, if you are in fact struggling financially, one of the best things you can do if you want to save money is go up the supply chain. So the closer you go up the supply chain, the further you go up the supply chain, I should say, the cheaper things are going to become. So if you want to buy rice, don't go to the corner store to buy rice. Don't go to the grocery store to buy rice. Don't even go to Costco to buy rice. You go to the wholesale food distributors to buy rice. And the great thing about these places is usually you don't even need a membership. In Canada, you don't need a membership for those, but you need a membership for Costco. These are typically the places where the restaurants shop. Now you can go even further up the supply chain. You can go directly to the farmer. Depending on what's grown within your region, you'll probably get a discount on those things if you can buy them directly from the farmer. Now, of course, that's going to be a commute for some people, but there are ways that you can budget, that you can save money. All of the flashy gizmos and gadgets that we show on the channel, these are for people who maybe they don't have time to do all that kind of stuff. They have busy lifestyles. They have enough disposable income. These are options that are out there. The thing that I hate to see happen is that when people do want to make an investment in preparedness products and they get duped into buying the crap. There's a lot of companies right now, I'm not going to name any because I don't want to get sued, but there's one in particular, they play on people's patriotism, we'll say, and they have products in every area, okay? They have power systems, they have food, they have all this stuff, and it's all the lowest grade quality possible, but they brand it all, and they're very good at marketing and branding, which you'll often find with any sort of successful retail company. It's very rare that you get a company that is very good at marketing and makes a very good product. That's when you get something like an Apple, okay? Those are very, very rare companies. More often than not, you have a company that makes a fabulous product but is terrible at marketing and packaging it. to the masses, or you get somebody who is very good at branding and marketing and they make a very shitty product. Anyways, I would encourage you, if you are going to stock up on food, we've brought NutriStore into our store. They stockpile, they make all kinds of stuff, grilled chicken, cheeses, probably like 50 different varieties we have on the website. You can get vegetables, okay, strawberries, powdered milk, ground beef, the list goes on. And the other company that we always proudly represent is the Freeze Dry Wholesale Company. If you want whole foods, okay, this is the company that supplies the government, bunkers, and all the elites. This is what the elites are going to eat. Essentially, it's as close as you can get to real food that's made every day that they serve in restaurants that's actually going to last 25 years, and whole, very large portions, which is not easy to do in terms of freeze drying. It takes a lot of energy that goes into this. With freeze drying, you're paying for the longevity, the energy that went into it, and the fact that 99.99% of the moisture has been taken out, and the texture is superb. It's way better than the dehydrated stuff, okay? Sorry for that long-winded interjection there, but that's the only way we can pay our bills around here and keep people employed. Now, we have 3,000 U.S. troops to arrive in the Persian Gulf soon. Thousands of troops arrive in the Red Sea amid ratcheting Iranian tensions. Now, this is not being talked about in the Iranian media. They're being rather hush-hush about it, but this comes, of course, on the heels of seizures of multiple commercial vessels within that region. This region is critical to the transit of Saudi Arabian crude, United Arab Emirates crude, even Iranian crude. So if a war breaks out here and Ukraine shuts this down, and by shut down, essentially it's kind of like a no-fly zone, but a no-go zone for ships, because they run the risk of basically being destroyed or targeted, because of course, even if they are a commercial vessel, the concern might be, as it is in the Black Sea with the grain corridor that was established and is no more, that they could be smuggling weapons in there, or that they could be military ships in disguise. So this is why it's a no-go zone if this actually happens, okay? So this could potentially see more engagements between the Iranians and the Americans. Is this going to cause the Iranians to relent a bit on their attempts at seizing these warships? It's possible, but in the greater context here of what is going on between Israel, Syria, Iran, with the Iranian nuclear enrichment, which is ongoing, it appears as though that the U.S. is putting troops into position in anticipation of a Israeli escalation, because now we have all of the U.S.'s top-tier weapons in the Persian Gulf ready to go to possibly assist some sort of Israeli intervention. So could it be that this is where the war is going to shift to if and when this Ukrainian counteroffensive fails? I guess time will tell. Now, on that front, on the Ukrainian front, you're hearing all kinds of mixed messages. I know all the Russia bros are saying that the Ukrainian counteroffensive is an abject failure. It's over. The Ukrainians, however, say that they continue to say that forces will soon be in Crimea. Budanov, the elusive Budanov, who had a bit of a neck injury earlier in the year, it would have appeared, but is now back with a vengeance, has said that Ukrainian forces will be in Crimea by the end of the year. Now, what I'm hearing from the Ukrainian side is, with all of these little attacks that they're doing on the bridges that link Crimea with the mainland, etc., is what they're trying to do is cut the supply routes. They're trying to mess with the logistics before they do the blitzkrieg maneuver. They're going to go in there with their cluster munitions, and they're going to try to neutralize the minefields, probably all at once. I'm not a military guy. I'm just presuming exactly what they're going to attempt to do once they get these longer range missiles, the Storm Shadow, the Scalp missiles, which have already been deployed with some success, and possibly the Taurus missiles, which may not be coming for months and months, possibly not till 2024, but you just never know, because it seems as though once they announce it, they're already there the next day, which was the case with these Scalp missiles. But they're saying that it's the Russians, in fact, who are undermanned and outgunned. And this is not just Ukrainians saying this. This is Western commentators, okay? So I'm leaning towards, yeah, they've lost the counteroffensive. They say they've maintained the initiative. And I'm not going to go into the minutia of the battlefield because it's just beyond this channel's scope to try to delve into all the specifics of that, and which battalion's doing what, and which progress has been made. And you really need to know the names of these towns and, you know, the defensive fortifications and the real tactical situations on the ground. But essentially, this is where Ukraine is trying to break through here in the south, okay? They're trying to break through one of the most heavily fortified regions. So they still think that there is hope that they can break through this region and cut off the land bridge with the Russian mainland and Crimea, which is down here. So they're basically going to try to cut this off so that the Russians cannot reinforce, at least not through land, and then they're going to make that final push. They say they have a whole corps, which is 20 to 40,000 men, ready to go to do the second phase of the counteroffensive. That's what they're calling it. And, I guess time will tell. I really, at this point, I'm only focusing on the big developments, and there haven't really been any major developments. The Russians, too, are claiming that they are going on the counteroffensive, but they're going to be doing that in and around the Kharkov region up here. So I guess time will tell with respect to that story. Now, in terms of what's going on in Africa right now, should we go there? I think we probably should, because that's definitely going to, it's not going to obviously have an immediate impact on you in your life, because chances are you're watching this from a Western country. But of course, it will put pressure on global commodity prices if a war breaks out. And it's likely that the war is going to look something like this in Africa. Okay, so here's a map that kind of shows you the situation here. So we have the country of Niger, and these are its loosely affiliated countries who have offered military support. These countries are in some way, shape, or form associated with the Wagner Group, and all of these other countries here that aren't in these two colors are associated with what's called ECOWAS. It's some sort of alliance of African countries. I don't know exactly what that abbreviation stands for, ECOWAS Military Coalition, but essentially their interests lie in Niger, because if Niger becomes destabilized, it of course borders around 7 different countries, and that destabilization could rapidly spill over. Nigeria has plans to chart a pipeline through here, and of course the French have their nuclear mining operations there. The Americans have 1,000 troops there. Victoria Nuland went there today to try to make contact with the president who was recently disposed there. The current sitting government, if you will, who conducted the coup, has not allowed that to happen. So it's looking very likely that war is about to break out here in the not so distant future. So is this Russia attempting to destabilize the region to put more pressure on the West to bring them back to the negotiating table? Because if Russia causes destabilization in Africa, that leads to commodity price hikes, that leads to civil unrest and instability, economic instability in Europe, then Europe is forced to go back to the negotiating table to get that cheap Russian natural gas and oil if they can't get it elsewhere. I'm assuming that's what the thinking is. And there also, of course, is an undercurrent of resistance from the people within this region who feel as though they're under the boot heel of a neo-colonial, multinational, oppressive regime. So, even though, French imperialism has not been a thing overtly since the 1960s, many of the population there feel they are not reaping the benefits of their resource wealth, and certainly on paper, that is true. Former NATO commander warns of devastating full-blown war in Africa could erupt as a result of all of this stuff. So, yeah, there's people here in this very large stadium rallying around the new military government. And just a show there, some people are saying that, well, this is not really representative of the majority of people there because the people who are against this coup are hiding in their homes. But, you know, it's totally ambiguous at this point whether or not that is the case. They clearly have a lot of support from people. And if this is about democracy and the democratic, if there was corruption that put the recently deposed president in power, and I don't know much about African, politics, but if it was the case that there was some sort of corruption and puppet governmenting going on, and then this is the true democracy, this is what people want, then that would essentially make Niger under French and American occupation. Victoria Nuland went there to give them one last chance to bow down to the golden billion, as we call ourselves, and they said no, so they're going to war. I can't remember the exact quote that the rebel leader had said. I'll probably save it for another video, but it was something to the effect of, the only slave that's truly free is the one who actually fights for his freedom of his own initiation, and not by some savior, not by some liberal savior, okay, as we see in the movies. Not by, what's his face? What's the guy's name in Dances with Wolves? Kevin Costner. Not in their version of Kevin Costner with Dances with Wolves. Not going to happen. Or Avatar, or pick your movie. So this is the guy right here who met with Vladimir Putin, Ibrahim Traore, not too long ago. So, I mean, that picture says it all. That tells you everything you need to know about what's going on there right now. Even though the CIA indicates that they have no evidence to suggest that, oh God, do we want to go here? They have no evidence to suggest that the Russians are involved in the Niger coup. Sarah Cirillo, and this is real, guys, okay? This is real. And nothing against, I don't care what you do or who you do or when you do it on your own time. I could care less what you want to identify as. I'm not going to dead name you. It's just not a hill I care to die on. But I will say that this is comical. You have a new SBU spokesperson, essentially the equivalent of the Ukrainian version of the KGB, we'll say, okay? This is her. She was the one who said that they caught Gonzalo Lira at the border just a few days ago. And now she's in this video here basically reciting verbatim what the Nazis did in World War II. I mean, dehumanizing Russian soldiers. I understand the anger towards an invading country. And I understand that you will be upset with these people. But I don't foresee how this type of video helps your cause at all. Essentially, what she's saying in this 20-second clip is that we are humans and they are not. That's the exact quote. What you're seeing here is a human and this cardboard cutout of an orc, as they are referred. And then this, of course, has all kinds of throwbacks to a lot of the Nazi ideology of World War II, and I don't see why they... And it's no surprise that they get a person like this to do that and not some guy with a little mustache, if you know what I mean. Like, come on, guys. I mean, let's use our brains here. Anyways, this is not to say that, the Russia bros, they go too far. Like, I seen a post by one of the main Russia bros on Twitter the other day, and it had like Xi Jinping, Vladimir Putin, Kim Jong-un, and it basically said like the good guys. Like, it was that blatant and misguided. And no, there is no good guys. Xi Jinping, Vladimir Putin, Kim Jong-un, these are not good guys, okay? It's just that it's which bad guys get control of the world at this point. And I've always said that, while I don't agree with our inciting wars in other countries. And while I don't agree with this new form of imperialism that we've partaken in, I will say that at the end of the day, somebody is going to rule the world. You just can't have a multipolar world without a Cold War. And at the end of the day, I would rather it be us than them. I would rather equity for everybody, and I would rather we not go and fight wars in Ukraine and yada, yada, yada. But you got to understand it from the ruler's perspective. They know that the global reserve currency is intimately tied to the outcome in Ukraine. There's some Russian analysts and pundits who say, no, this is not existential for the West. But it very much is, because it's one of the first dominoes to fall. You see, the West was built on infinite expansion, imperialism. The West must continue to grow, or else it contracts, it declines, and it's the end. And right now we're at that point where it's essentially at the end. They can't progress any further. Russia checked them, put the brakes on them, and is now pushing it back. The NATO alliance is in effect contracting, even though it's expanding to include these other small countries at the same time. It is in all actuality actually contracting. It's contracting in Nigeria. It's contracting on the Korean Peninsula. It's going to contract in Taiwan and possibly into the Philippines. It is going to contract in South America, very likely with countries there going into BRICS. So the sphere of influence is receding, it's declining, it's shrinking, and that means economic contraction is coming, and that means unrest and upheaval is coming to our country. So that's basically the gist of it in a nutshell. What else do we got to talk about here? Wildfires continue to burn all around Canada. This is the wildfire situation. I mean, it's totally off the charts at this point. I think we've almost doubled the area burned record, doubled the record amount of area burned this year. And I'd say we're about 60% through the fire season. It still can go all the way to October, especially in places like BC. This is the Canadian Drought Monitor. So the likelihood of a wildfire emerging in the areas in blue is less likely, although it is still possible. The likelihood of it happening in the areas in red, where the major fires are burning right here, and in the BC lower southern interior, is very high. Down here, this drought-ridden region, which is very dry, bone dry. We're talking about, just pond scum, where these estuaries, not estuaries, these ponds and small, I don't want to call them lakes, but there's bodies of water. It's a very high water table here in the swampland of the prairies, and a lot of that water is just gone. It's just pond scum. It's just dry, baked. It's going to take many, many years of good rain that I don't know if we're ever going to get to refill to put the water table back to where it was. Anyways, down here, not much risk of forest fire because there's not a lot of forest. You will get grass fires occasionally, but yada, yada, yada. Anyways, go to firesmoke.ca if you want the current smoke analysis. It's been pretty much smoky here to some degree or another every single day, off and on. It's looking like it may let up a little bit, but certainly not if you're in Calgary. Expect a big blast of that to come soon. Now, what else do we need to talk about? We need to talk about the prices of commodities, okay? Because it is absolutely insane right now. I took the family on a little trip recently, and man, I just don't know how anybody affords anything. Just to go to the movies, just to stay in a hotel for a night. You're paying, it seems like double. I know it's not quite double. They're saying it's 36%. But I'm guessing that that's on the more moderate end of the spectrum in terms of what's out there. But the price of things is just absolutely insane right now, especially if you want to take a break. And there's a lot of people right now who need a break. Just to travel across Canada, you pay your gas, you pay your hotels, and you factor in the cost of activities, which is absolutely absurd right now. I mean, it's a many $1,000 trip just to take a week-long trip. Now, there's ways to do it that are on the cheap. You can sleep in a camper like we showed yesterday, or you can sleep in a tent. But, I mean, if you really want to have a break, Unfortunately, rustic style camping like that, or even glamping, isn't really much of a break. But this is just a sign of, how much stress people must be under at this point in time. The only thing that's down is computers, down 4%, and vehicle rentals, or TVs, sorry, which are down 17%. It's no surprise that the things that they use to distract you are cheaper as we descend into this age of austerity. The household costs, and again, there's been no disinflation. There's been disinflation, but not much deflation. So the price of gas has declined, but pretty much the price of everything else has increased. Electricity, the cost of major appliances, furniture, bedding, tools, hardware. As all of this stuff continues to become offshored and people demand better wages. I mean, they're still trying to negotiate with the people who are currently working at the ports here in Canada to get the stuff from China to the rest of Canada. So there's a backlog at the ports because the workers there are on strike. And we're going to see this because wages have not kept pace with inflation over the last couple years. This is one for vehicle costs. So we've seen at the peak of the pandemic last year and at the peak of the war, vehicle prices were up. Used car, I believe, gasoline, I should say, is up 60%. Now it's only up 21% over what it was. But the only reason why that is because we've depleted the the oil reserve, the strategic oil reserve in the United States. So it's very likely that if these attacks continue on Russian oil tankers, if the war breaks out in Niger, if Saudi Arabia doesn't open the spigot just a little bit more, that we are going to have to drain the strategic oil reserve even more in order to combat inflation. But that is the scary thing here, is that one of the only things that have offset one of the major variables in the inflation calculus is oil and gas. Cheaper oil and gas brought down inflation overall. It really is the driver. It's the lifeblood of the economy. If that is way up, pretty much everything else is way up. New vehicles continue to go up. Car and truck rentals, though, are down. And I don't even see how that's true, because we were going to rent a vehicle recently, and you're still in the $300 to $500 a day. What? For a decent vehicle? Are you kidding me? Anyways, it's crazy. Now, as for food, I shouldn't have to say this at all, but the cost of food is through the roof. Fruits and vegetables are one of the only ones that they claim here are up 20%. Is that chicken or is that? No, that's fruits and vegetables are up 7%. I don't even believe that to be the case. I don't believe that at all, because anytime I go buy produce, it seems like it's smaller. And this is the thing, is I don't think they include shrinkflation in this. So things are getting smaller and you're paying more for them. And arguably, there's more chemicals. The quality isn't as good. I don't know if there's a quality index that we have to look at here. Let me just move this over so you can actually see the amounts. So 54% looks like margarine, and eggs around 50% increase since the last 3 years. And this is just the last 3 years, okay? So you don't see the rest of these graphs that goes back 20 years when the prices were by and large still rising. Now, a lot of food prices peaked during the Great Recession, and now they're going to peak once again. Another interesting graphic that I want to share with you guys, let me see if I can pull it up here. It is these two graphics here. This one here. Let me see if I can, let me just see. I'll just pull it up as a picture here. So this is Chinese stockpiles of various grains, okay? Chinese commodity stocks, what they have on hand. Now, in the year 2000, they appeared to have a big stockpile of stuff, and then that declined all the way down to 2008. Maybe the Communist Party got worried at this point in time, but they started stockpiling things like crazy. And remember, the population size of China is now in contraction. Not as much as many Western countries, but it's not growing like it used to. And they're still stockpiling soybeans, 50 million tons of soybeans, over 100 million tons of rice, over almost 150 million tons of wheat, and 200 million tons of corn. So they are preparing for something. They're preparing for hard times. And these stockpiles have grown immensely. We're talking about the corn stockpile has quadrupled in 10 years. The wheat stockpile has tripled in 10 years. The rice stockpile, which now India has banned the export of, has more than doubled in the last 10 years. And the soybean stockpiles have probably, it looks like, around 2 or 3x'd as well. So China is preparing for the shizzy to hit the fizzy, and it looks as though Poland is preparing for war. Poland is spending more per capita on its military than any other NATO country. 4% of their GDP is going to military expenditure. That is huge. They're definitely preparing for war. And it's no surprise that they're about to have a major military parade. And it's going to be one of the largest ones since the Cold War. The Poles are preparing the largest military parade since 1989. It will take place on August 15th. I actually heard it's going to be the biggest since World War II. The last 3 years it has not been held at all, but this summer they promise a grandiose action. Okay, I guess we'll see. I've always thought that military parades were one of those appear strong when you're weak, art of war type ruse, but who knows. So according to Yehor Cherniv, the leader of Ukraine's delegation to NATO Parliamentary Assembly, he stated that Germany is prepared to transfer Taurus long-range cruise missiles to Ukraine. Taurus missiles have a range of 500 kilometers. I apologize, I said 500 miles earlier in this video. Fly at an altitude of 30 to 70 meters. Now, here's what I think is happening. Because they have a very limited supply of the Storm Shadow missiles, I think what they're going to do is when those stockpiles of the Storm Shadow missiles start to run out, that's when Germany is going to send in the Taurus missiles. This really does just appear to be a way to stall, to delay, to try to attrit Russia as long as possible, of course, at the expense of Ukrainian people. And they're just going to keep drawing it out. But if they give them those 500-kilometer Taurus missiles, they're going to start firing them at Crimea. And that's when, you know, things get pretty crazy. Right now, they're trying to take out all of the crossing points. They're trying to take out some of the key critical infrastructure. They know that time is of the essence. They have to do something, in my personal opinion, they got to do something before winter. Because what Russia is going to do is they're going to start targeting the grid once again in the run-up to winter to try to put more pressure on Ukraine. They're going to try to destroy the power grid entirely this time. And that means that next spring, the Ukrainians are going to have a very difficult time resurrecting their military to do another major counteroffensive unless they have some windfall of military support from the West. And it could very well be that this is Ukraine's Austerlitz move, that they are feigning weakness when in fact they do have a sizable military and a sizable amount of forces yet to bring to bear. It could be because this is the age of subterfuge where you have to misdirect and you have to try to trick your enemy. You can't just, you know, we're living in the satellite age. The Russians see everything with their satellites. So the only thing that the Ukrainians can really do, and the only things that the Russians can do, is try to do this maneuver-style trickery. So that's what we got on that front. Apparently, according to Budanov, he says that he has agents within Putin's entourage. Okay, that may be true. No compromise with Moscow, very little chance for peace on the horizon, it would appear. We had some close calls with a MQ-9 drone and a Su-35 in Syria more and more close encounters between between the Americans and the Russians in Syria. This one I found interesting. I'm not really sure what to make of this, but CNN says the majority of U.S. oppose Congress authorizing additional funding to support Ukraine in the war. A new CNN poll finds. So one of two things will happen is that support will wane and we will slowly redirect support to elsewhere within the NATO alliance, which I can't see them doing at this point, because that means, in my personal opinion, based on what I've talked about on the channel before about economic contraction and the macroeconomic picture as it relates to this conflict, I think that that's the death knell for the American financial system if they do pull out of Ukraine. You're going to either see a major incident that will increase American support for Ukraine, or there has to be some incident, whether it's a military success on the part of Ukrainians or a catastrophic event which draws the ire of Americans against the Russians. And you need one of those situations like they had in Iraq, a testimonial of some little girl saying that Saddam is throwing the babies out the window, or you need something like that to bring people back to the table on this thing. But I guess we'll see. I guess we'll see what happens with the next election. I really don't know what to make of this shift in the mainstream media. It is a slow shift. It is incredibly gradual, but it's happening. There's definitely a shift. They're starting to, it seems like they're trying to back out of the room. Now, that's a good thing from a World War nuclear realm of possibility. It's good because it lowers the risk of nuclear war, but it also, by their own logic, by their own definition, increases the likelihood of world war, because they're the ones who are saying if Russia makes it into Ukraine and is able to capture these territories, that the likelihood of war is higher because the Russians are going to move into the Baltics and Poland next and yada, yada, yada. So, by their own logic, they're making World War III even more likely. In terms of the clown world stuff, we have Trudeau with this whole thing. We're Team Barbie. I mean, I think he's just saying provocative things now. I don't understand what the point of this was. Is Barbie making a political statement? Barbie has been politicized, I presume. I'm not following this because I simply don't care. This is a video for children. Now, is there going to be subliminal messages and grooming going on in these movies? Probably, but it's just nothing I've had time to pay attention to. But I think this is silly, especially in light of what's happened with him recently. And then we have Jill Biden, is that her? In with some fairly eccentric individuals. And a photo shoot here, District 1 of the Hunger Games is in full effect. Life imitates art, folks. Life imitates art. I think that's all I got for you guys today. We're almost going on an hour here. We're going to set a new record. Oh, there's another post here by a very pro-Ukrainian account. Just in case you guys think I only listen to the Russia bros, I listen to everybody. Anton Gurashenko is one of the most pro-Ukraine disinformants out there, so take this one with a grain of salt. Mobilization is likely to begin in Russia by autumn, and it will be extremely difficult to avoid it. For now, the large cities, in Moscow in particular, live as if there were no war at all, but it will come. Because, of course, Moscow has been attacked, and apparently on August 23rd or August 24th, there's going to be a major drone swarm, or at least that was the implication of a recent propaganda video released by the Ukrainians. Most of the Russian soldiers who were mobilized a year ago have never been given leave, and those who are still alive and uninjured are very tired, and that is true. So it's not enough to have 1 million soldiers. If you want 1 million active duty soldiers, you pretty much need 2 million, because they have to do tours. You have to cycle them out, and they got to go and get refreshed and then come back to the front at a later date. Considering losses today, the Ukrainian General Staff announced a figure of 250,000. A second wave of Russian mobilization is inevitable. You have both sides claiming that they've killed 250,000 people. Guys, your guess is as good as mine. Let me know what you think about that in the comment section below. I will say, on one final note, I found this to be quite amusing. Prime Minister of Japan raises concerns about Russia's nuclear threat. Now, this, of course, on the anniversary of Hiroshima. And the irony of this is that, you know, I shouldn't need to say it, but it was the United States who decided, in their infinite wisdom, to attack a civilian target, a solely civilian target, as far as I know, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The majority of the deaths were civilian deaths. They could have dropped those nuclear bombs on military targets, and there'll be people who say, well, in dropping those nukes, it prevented millions of dying from a protracted conventional war, and that in dropping the nuclear weapons, they in fact stopped a much greater catastrophe unfolding. Sure, but did they have to drop them on civilian cities? So Japan, I understand, they're still under U.S. occupation. I believe there's still several tens of thousands of troops there. But, you know, this seems like they're pandering a little bit too much. And, you know, calling Russia the threat when Russia's never nuked anybody just seems a little disingenuous, that's all. Now, I think I've pretty much touched on everything I want to touch on today, guys. Please, if you want to support the channel, the best way to do it is to support the people who work at CanadianPreparedness.com. Don't support me, okay? I'm fine without Canadian Preparedness. In fact, Canadian Preparedness is a bit of a money pit at this point in time because, once again, we only try to bring you the high quality products. But if you want to support domestic workers who make good wages, who can support their families and get prepared at the same time with good deals, I should add, and free shipping, over $200 on 90% of the products we sell, go to CanadianPreparedness.com. Get some of this Nutri-Store food, which is absolutely delicious, or wholesale freeze-dried. Thanks for watching, guys. Take care. Canadian Prep Pro.